Welcome back and to this section 5 on strategies and techniques for improving your landscape photography. Probably my favorite form of photography. My wife and I enjoy traveling around the country and the world, and whenever we do, that camera goes with us such that we can take those pictures and create those memories. In the last section, we looked at blurring the background by opening the aperture all the way up for our portrait shots. With landscape shots, we're going to go the exact opposite direction. Large f-stop, small aperture, maximizing depth of field. We want to see those mountains in the far distance as well as those faces near up. So we're going to go again with aperture priority mode, but this time high f-stop, maximizing the depth of field. In addition, in this section, we're going to start to look at a few more photographs, get some inspiration from these guys. Most of them I will have taken off the internet from unnamed landscape photographers. But in addition, we're going to be looking at quite a few taken by my wife, who's a reasonably accomplished landscape photographer in her own right. So we're going to see whether she sticks with the classic approaches or whether she goes out on her own just a little bit. Should be exciting. Wikipedia defines landscape photography as the capturing of nature. Agreed, no debate, but I go a step further. I like to think of landscape photography as man's interaction with nature. It's not just about the beautiful mountains. It's my memory of that beautiful mountain that's at least important to me. Similar with those rivers, those trees, it's not just the tree. It's the tree as I remember it. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes here, is putting together landscape memories. Let's get started with what I'll call classic landscape images. These I just grabbed off the internet. This one is pretty much textbook landscape photography. Sunset bathing the mountains in the background, river meandering top left to bottom right, and the tall fir trees in the foreground. I don't know who this person is, but they got an A+ for composition, A+ for lighting, and A++ for holding true to the classic landscape theme. Ansel Adams would be proud. Oh, by the way, if you don't know who Ansel Adams is, check him out on Google because he's sort of the father of this whole type of genre of photography and clearly had the eye. Here's another classic landscape. 12 o'clock noon sun shining straight down into the gorge, minimizing the shadows. Very high contrast between the green river and the canyon walls. Fantastic composition, the river swerving left to right, top to bottom. A++ for the effort. Again, Ansel would be proud. One more and we'll call this one a sect. Magnificent mountains with glaciers in the background. High contrasting colors between the blue lake and the green mountain grass. And that tallest mountain peak reflecting into the foreground. Just fantastic composition and what natural beauty. Thank you, nameless internet landscape photographer. But I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but can I do that? Yes. Yes, you can. Here's one my wife took up in northern Wisconsin. Depth of focus, A. Composition, A+. Look at that tallest tree, dead center, and then well-balanced heights toward each edge. Contrasting color leaves reflecting off the lake in the foreground. Even a little framing going on with the single oak branch in the upper right-hand corner. Ansel would be proud. I know I am. You nailed that one, girl. All right, let's start thinking now about what it was in those shots that just made them so darn appealing to us and what it is about landscape photography that can move us so powerfully. I'll contend there's really 3 factors we need to be looking at. One is sort of the mechanics. That is, we need to get the depth of the field and the focus right. 2, much more difficult, we need to get composition right. And this one is just going to take some practice. And 3 is lighting. Let's start with depth of field. Pretty easy one. I imagine you already know where we're going with this. In landscapes, we want to maximize the depth of field. We do that by setting our f-stop all the way to the max. First, of course, putting our camera into aperture priority mode, then minimizing the aperture size by maximizing the f-stop number. Once we've got that set up, then it's time to get our scene in focus. And let's take a look, for example, at this particular image shot by my wife out in Needles Highway, South Dakota. The background is this beautiful mountain peak, foreground lake, and then some fir trees in the very near foreground. How did she go about focusing this one in? Well, first, as I said, she got her depth of focus maximized by first setting her camera on aperture priority mode, maximizing the f-stop, and then picking a point to focus on about midway into the depth of field. In this case, she chose this fir tree just on the opposite side of the lake. Got her autofocus points pointed at that guy and pulled the trigger on the shutter release. Voila, you have a landscape that's in perfect focus. In addition, while we're on the topic, this is a good introduction to composition as well, which we're going to talk about next. What happens when we take this same image and we put it onto the rule of thirds cropping tool? Sure enough, perfect composition. That tallest peak on the mountain is in the upper left-hand intersection, whereas our foreground fir tree is in the bottom right. Well done, dear. Nice job. Oh, and by the way, again, if you don't have aperture priority mode on your camera, you may have the opportunity to use pre-programmed landscape mode, typically identified by the little mountain icon. So go ahead and use that. All right, assuming you've got the depth of field conquered and focusing under control, the next opportunity for creating a great landscape is getting the composition right. This one's going to take a little more practice. Let's look at some examples. How about this shot of the Tetons? I think most people would think it's a pretty decent shot. Very nice color delineation between the sky, mountains, and the green hills. Nice balance between the tallest center peak and the two smaller adjacent mountains. And oh, so nice with the puffy cloud interacting with that tallest peak. However, please compare it with this shot taken at the exact same location. I have no problem with just scenery photos. I think a certain number of them need to be taken. But hey, I think this one has a lot more impact. It has a distinct foreground and background subjects. In this case, we'd set up our tripod and we became the foreground subjects. Hey, you're going to create these things to create memories. Go ahead and put yourselves in them and be part of that landscape memory. Another example, Mount Rushmore without a foreground subject. Try it again. Now Mount Rushmore with a ruggedly handsome foreground subject. My suggestion, take them both, and when it comes time to create your DVD later, you can then decide whether one, both, or neither gets stuck in that ultimate DVD. Oh, and by the way, the foreground doesn't always have to be a person. Check out this shot of a little waterfalls in northern Wisconsin, again taken by my wife. Here the foreground subject is this maple tree branch with all its fall foliage. Gorgeous shot, well done. How about this one, again at Mount Rushmore? Now foreground is this fir tree branch. Guys, that's pretty good composition right there. Just a couple more examples of foreground, background composition and the impact it can add to your landscape shots. Hey, you still get the memory of that majestic location, but now you're included in that memory. Try it. It's going to be important 10 years from now when you go back reviewing that DV. because it's going to add a special plus to that memory you're putting together. All right, that takes care of depth of field and composition. Our last strategic element for great landscapes is lighting. If you ask professional landscape photographers, they're going to tell you that the best time of day to take landscape photos is right after sunrise or right before sunset. It's because the colors are more intense. The light from the sun has been a little diffused and it makes the colors brighter. That's all well and good, but I'm not getting up at 5 o'clock to shoot landscapes. So for me, we're going to have to talk about sunsets. If you can get up at 5 and go shoot sunrises, knock yourself out, but it's just not my style. Here are a couple examples taken off our back porch. Yes, I do live in a drop-dead gorgeous area, and the Blue Ridge Mountains do actually get a couple of blue-purple hues to them just before sunset. Oh, it's just part of living up here in the mountains. But surely there's more to landscape lighting than just shooting at sunrise or sunset. Yes, there most certainly is, and it has nothing to do with the relative temperature of the colors. Check out this shot taken by my wife at her brother's cabin in northern Wisconsin. In this one, the light becomes the story. Light coming through a forest. Gus, how natural can you get? How about this shot? The shadows here actually help to accentuate these early Native American cliff dwellings. Don't be afraid of shadows. They could sometimes be your friend, become part of this story. That said, bright sunlight and water typically do not play well together unless you have a polarizing filter on your camera. Check out this image. The water on the right is pretty much a washout. Same sort of effect we got in the last section when you had that flash going directly in your portrait subject's face. Too much light and glare and you lose the detail. Solution? Easy. Screw a circular polarizing filter on the end of your lens and knock that glare down. Besides, they also serve to protect your lens from scratching as you're moving around in the environment. Double duty for like $15. Our last thing on lighting, and in particular sunsets, is it's really easy to jack up the color of sunsets and landscapes in Photoshop, and we'll learn how to do this in the next couple of sections. However, you can go too far with this. Landscape photography is supposed to be about capturing nature. If you jack the color up to an unnatural level, you've ceased doing that. In Photoshop lingo, this image was overcooked. For example, I got this image off the internet when I searched on great landscape photos. Well, maybe. More likely in my book is that this was just way overcooked in Photoshop. Remember, the goal here is to glorify the natural beauty. Don't start creating your own unnatural world. Finally, before we wrap this section up, I want to talk a little about what I refer to as man's impact on the natural environment and how these can also make great landscape shots. Again, the premise here is we're creating memories for future review. Check out this image of this boat in this lake. It really grabs you as impactful because it's so contrary to what your brain expects the location of this ship to be. Our brain doesn't like it when this ship is under the water. Very interesting and just a really cool shot as far as I'm concerned. Here's another example of man's interaction with his natural environment. In this case, man sort of taking over his natural environment. Finally, take a look at this shot. I actually took this one. I'm not going to tell you where, but it really meant a lot to me to remember what I had seen because it was a pretty powerful thing as far as I was concerned. Not going to judge good or bad. It was just very powerful. All right, that concludes our discussion of landscape photography strategies and techniques. Let's review what we learned. Remember, Wikipedia told us that the definition of landscape photography was the capturing of nature. I went and added to that by saying I thought it was man's interaction with nature and the creation of, at least for myself, memories of the places in nature I have experienced. I went on to suggest that I thought there were three major elements to creating great landscapes. The first being getting the depth of field correct. In landscapes, we want to maximize depth of field. In doing so, we're going to set our cameras to aperture priority mode and maximize the f-stop to minimize the aperture size. Easy stuff to do. In terms of getting the focus correct, pick a point in the depth of field about halfway away. Get your autofocus points on it and shoot away. Depth of field and focus issues should take care of themselves after that. Next primary strategy is composition. A lot more difficult. Going to take some practice here for you. My suggestion, always have a strong subject in the background as well as in the foreground. As far as I'm concerned, those foreground subjects are best when they're people. Alternatively, that branch, a rock, whatever, but accentuate the depth of field. Lots of people like to use a lake, and the reflections off the background subject also works great. Final element is lighting. We suggested that the light right after sunrise and right before sunset was the best. I also like high noon if you're looking to minimize shadows. It's all good. It's up to you. Just give it some practice. All right. That concludes our discussion of landscape photography. In the next section, we're going to get into high speed, low light, and underwater photography strategies and techniques such that we can get our camera into fully manual mode and start experimenting there. Hope you enjoyed. Look forward to seeing you in the next section. Remember, keep on learning.